Hello, and thank you for being here. I'm Flavio Bonfiglio Sorans from Foregenix. I'm a VP, and I've been a QSA more than 11 years. I also P2P application, P2P 3DS, and secure software lifecycle assessor.
Yep. Hello. Good afternoon. It's good to be here. My name is Oluwaseun Olaniyan. I'm an information security risk officer at Adyen. So one of my responsibilities is managing Adyen's PCI program. Thank you for having us.
All right, so these presentations offer a comprehensive exploration of the PCI standards landscape, combining the practical insights from Adyen, a global financial technology platform, and the assurance expertise of Foregenix, a QSA company. Together, we're going to examine how organizations can approach PCI compliance not as an obligation, but as an opportunity to build stronger security systems.
Yes, our agenda are quite straightforward, like Flavio mentioned. So it's about telling our story about how we've implemented PCI standards and also how our Foregenix as our QSA has helped us. So today we'll be taking a look at an overview of Adyen PCI programs, Foregenix roles in collaborating with us, and case insight and best practice.
Right, so let's start with the overview of Adyen's PCI programs.
Oh, before you do that, let's first of all take a look at why this matters, right? PCI beyond the acronyms, yeah? So the first thing we've seen is this PCI as a standard has actually helped build trust between businesses and customers. So our customers actually trust us when they know that some products are actually certified or they follow some specific standards.
That's right. We understand that for clients, compliance is an opportunity to show that they care about security. But security and compliance are together, and compliance is often a baseline upon which security can be built. In Foregenix, we like to walk the path with you guys in order to build from compliance to rigorous security.
Yeah, definitely. We know PCI protects sensitive data from breaches, but beyond PCI standards protecting sensitive data or card holder data, we also try as much as possible to extend this control to other types of data that are critical to us as a business.
That's right, and payment data is not necessarily all the sensitive data that you have to protect. So we really like to offer a general approach to security, ensure that all your critical assets are secure.
Yes, and for example, Adyen as a company, we have our banking license in almost in 3 countries. We have in the UK, in the US, and in the Netherlands, right? So what we've seen is PCI as a standard has actually helped us meet some global regulatory requirements. It has actually made us, because we use that as a baseline for meeting our regulatory requirements. Right?
Right, and also there are some regulators that rely on PCI standards, like the Panoramic Car Association, who relies on PTS, P2P, and SSS to offer an end-to-end protection through their validations.
Yes, and lastly, we've seen PCI as a standard that has actually helped us reinforce businesses and as an enabler. For example, when you look at what happened after COVID, there are a lot of in-person payments or card-present transactions going on, right? And that was why there was actually the invention of MPOC standard. So at Adyen as a business, we've invested a lot in our MPOC solution, and PCI standard has actually helped us gauge this system and actually gauge this product to make sure they are secure and compliant.
All right, so let's now finally see the PCI products mappings of Adyen.
Yes, what we've tried to do in Adyen is to actually make all our products map to every PCI standard. For example, our security program, the baseline of our security program is built on PCI DSS. Then also the focus of our payment platform, we actually maintain one single payment platform for all our solutions. And the focus of our payment platform is actually built on PCI DSS. Then also our checkout product, our issuing product, and our acquiring product are also built around PCI DSS. Apart from that, we also have the 3DS Core and 3DS SDK, which is also one of the PCI standards, right? This has actually helped us to build our authentication product. So our authentication product is actually built around this. We also have the PCI P2P and PCI PIN, which is actually the core of our in-person product, which is basically what we call our card-present transaction. Then what we've done again is, because PCI SLC or SSS was one of the requirements for MPOC, we've tried as much as possible to actually leverage this in building our software development lifecycle. So our software development lifecycle is built around PCI SLC and SSS. Then lastly, MPOC as a solution. Also, it's actually what we've used for our tap-to-pay solution.
That's right, yes. You can see Adyen has taken a comprehensive approach to our compliance and took every opportunity to maximize effort and approach to all standards separately, but also combining whenever the possibility is there. So this is very useful also from our side because we can see that this is impactful and beneficial for the overall compliance program.
Yeah, let's take a look at a dual perspective. Basically, this is just to talk about how we've approached most of our compliance program and also how Foregenix has actually helped us or how our QSA have helped us. The first thing we do is getting our stakeholders involved. Because we have these multiple programs that we manage, we try as much as possible to have all stakeholders involved. For example, in-house, we have a PCI task force, which comprises of our developers, our product people, even our account managers. They are also involved in this task force.
Yeah, and one thing that actually worked out quite well was the fact of having a global compliance lead, which is you, Olu, and that helped us organize that all technical owners and all compliance leaders were upon the same level of scrutiny and also allowing to plan effectively throughout the different compliance programs.
Yeah, and one more thing again is we try as much as possible to communicate changes of requirements early to business owners or requirements owners in-house. And also, if there are anything that is going to change in our product mapping or in our product feature, we try as much as possible to also bring in our QSA to actually look at this so that we don't get surprises on the days of our assessment.
That's right. And on our side, we are quite aware that standard requirements change over time, or even technical FAQs got updated because they're a consistent part of the standards as well. So in order to help Adyen, we take good care of understanding those changes and provide an impact analysis so we can plan ahead accordingly. And sometimes a gap may be required depending on the amount of changes.
Yeah, and also it's also very important to document and evidence effectively. For example, Foregenix as an organization, they've actually helped us with some GRC tools that help us in documenting our evidence and even helping us to do some pre-assessment activities.
Yeah, I mean, coordinating assessment activities, including recollection of evidence, we understand it's quite a thing. So at Foregenix, we offer a GRC tool which is called Olaniyan, and we have seen that it was dramatically impactful moving the standards forward.
Yeah. And lastly, because we have multiple PCI programs that we actually manage, so what we've done is to reduce duplication across this program. We've actually built like a security framework around this program to make sure that programs that are aligned to one another are actually brought together. For example, PCI DSS and PCI 3DS basically are almost the same thing. So what we've done is we've planned our assessment according to how this program aligns. PCI DSS and 3DS, P2PE and PIN, then also SLC, which is the software lifecycle, and SSS, the software security standards.
That's right, yeah. That mostly reduces assessment fatigue because we can concentrate our efforts of using the same time during interviews to assess the same level of requirements.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah. Let's take a look at real-world collaboration and what we've done. For example, the first thing here is strategic alignment, understanding our environment, our technology, and our way of working. Adyen as a company, we are first of all an engineering company, right? So what that means is that a lot of our solutions are actually developed in-house. So what we've done is before engaging our QSA or pre-assessment, we'll try as much as possible to bring in our QSA to understand our way of working, to understand our technology, so that we don't get surprises on the days of assessment.
That's right, yeah. Before we dive into the specific requirements of each standards, we have to understand how's your business model. What are your architectures? Are you cloud-based, native? Do you have other type of technologies that have to be considered? So we are well aware that there's no one-size-fits-all, so we have to align to your business.
Yes. And the second point here is using a risk-based approach. Fine, we understand that you need to meet the requirement and that's all. But what we've done is most of these requirements, we actually look at most of this requirement and most of this control from a risk perspective. We try as much as possible to look at this control and to integrate it into our integral risk management framework. And we develop our controls around this to mitigate risk.
That's right, yeah. Compliance is not just a checklist. We want to show the real value out of the security program, and is to mitigate risk per your different contexts.
Yes, and the next point here talks about collaborative assessment management. At Adyen, one of our formulas is we are not being slowed down by stewards. So basically, we don't want compliance or we don't want the risk team to be seen as the one slowing down the business, right? So what we've done is during assessment, we try as much as possible to look at the calendar of our engineers, of people that will be involved during assessment, and even before assessment, we try to make them understand what is expected of them, that assessment becomes very natural to them because no one wants to get surprises in front of the auditors. Yep.
That's right, yeah. And also, we are well aware that documentation, policies might be there, but that doesn't necessarily cut it. We have to ensure that those processes are being followed and everything is kept in a sustainable, automated or controlled way to serve its purpose.
Yes, and what are the common challenges we face during assessment, which is natural, right? The first thing we'll talk about here is scope creep, which is definitely what almost all of us would actually have faced one way or the other. So what we've done is during assessments, we'll notice that there are times that maybe 3 months or 2 months to assessment, you notice there's this particular product or there's this particular system that you've not scoped properly or that has not been brought into scope. I think what has helped us actually is the PCI requirement that now talks about you actually doing your scoping every 6 months. This has actually helped us a lot in reducing scope creeps.
That's right, yeah. We have seen that scope expands dramatically due to late discoveries. So we want to prevent that. And updating data flow diagrams and inventory of assets is a way to keep your house in order. So anticipating scoping exercises is a good idea. For some organizations, even a shorter term, like quarterly basis, it's also quite useful.
Yeah, and the second point here talks about evidence management. We can't overemphasize this enough, right? So evidence management, so we try as much as possible to make sure evidences are collated in a timely manner. For example, like I mentioned earlier, the tool that we use, we actually leverage a lot on the tool from our QSA to actually help us when it comes to evidence management, right?
Right, yeah, evidence can be fragmented and not controlled and disseminated through different teams. So it's prior that we have some sort of global way or centralized ways of controlling it.
Yes, and the next point about multi-standard alignment, like I mentioned, because we have a lot of standard that we need to comply with, and we've built this around our security program. So we don't want a situation where almost every month you need to have an engineer to interview for different type of PCI assessments. So what we've done is we try to group most of these assessments in the same quarter. If, for example, we need to do PCI DSS and 3DS, like I mentioned, we try as much as possible to have it in a single quarter so that we can actually reuse some of this evidence, and because some of this evidence actually overlaps. Yeah.
That's right, and we want to plan those assessments, ensuring that the teams involved, the processes and technologies, if they are related to, let's say, that overlap that you mentioned between P2P and PIN, well, we assess them together. So that reduces assessment fatigue, duplicate work, and it makes things move straightforward.
Yeah, and the last point here, it's also very good to understand how to manage your stakeholders during this assessment, because see, most of these PCI programs as a multi-program activity. You need to talk to different people. For example, you have vendors that are also in scope that you need to talk to. It's good to have a common person or a common resource that actually glue most of these people together. Organizing meetings with your QSA, organizing meetings with the requirements owner is also very important.
Yeah, you have to bring your key stakeholders as soon as possible so you can have that hand.
Yep. Yeah. So, a look at some of the things that have actually helped us. So we've just highlighted 2 of them here. For example, I think there is one on, we would say, improvement of our security posture. There was a requirement on SBOM from the PCI SSS So what we did was, when we saw this requirement, we see this as an opportunity to improve our SBOM, how we actually develop our SBOM, right? So what we did was, because we see this requirement is actually common across, for example, SBOM requirement is in CRA, there's an element of it in DORA, there's an element of this in NIS2. Instead of us just focusing on our MPOC solution, which was actually the reason why we did SSS, we try to actually apply this across board. So that was one of the things that we did that has actually helped us improve our SBOM process.
That's right. I mean, we identified that one requirement in the web software module of the secure software standard was useful across the board on Adyen's vulnerability management program, and especially to control third-party libraries and open source that you widely use.
Yes, yeah, that's correct. And the second one here talks about the open source, which Flavio mentioned, right? So what we've done is, because we have our open source tool, which our merchants actually depend on. So what we did was to actually bring this in scope of our PCI DSS and also our SSS. So this actually gives our merchant assurance that most of these plugins have been validated, and there is adequate assurance from our QSA on it.
Right. Yep.
Yeah. So what are the key takeaways from this talk? The first of all, I want us to see PCI as a strategic enabler of the business, not just for compliance alone. A lot of effort that we put into assessments can actually be used to actually build our security program. Yeah.
That's right. And as assessors, we are your partners in crime. So we want to reduce risk as the same as you want. So the more we can focus on that, the better.
Yeah, and it's also very important to start early and you plan your assessment, and start early and plan your assessments correctly. Yep.
That's correct. Yeah.
And the third one here talks about regular communication and documentation. So it's very good to actually have your communication internally. You communicate with your internal stakeholders and also to your assessor, so that on the days of assessments, you don't get surprises there. Yeah.
That's right. And as I said, see beyond compliance. Think about compliance as an opportunity to improve your general security posture.
Yeah. So I want to thank you for this.
Thank you very much for being here.